Welcome back everyone. In this video we will learn how we can do Vlookup using Python's Openpyxl module. Now before I jump into writing a code, let me show you what you can do using a Vlookup. So here I have two Excel sheet open, master data and daily data. Now in daily data we don't have first name, last name, email and gender column. So what you will need to do to get data from this Excel sheet to this Excel sheet. So to do that, you can use Vlookup. Basically, when you have one common column, in this case we have this ID column here in daily data, and in master data we have the same column, right? We can compare this column and transfer different columns such as this first name, last name, email into this column. That way you can transfer data from one Excel sheet to another one. So just give you an example what you can do using Vlookup. For instance, let's say you wanted to get a first name, last name and email for the person who have ID assigned to as 18. Now certainly we don't have that data in daily sheet. So what we can do is use Vlookup here and look into this master data sheet and find a row where ID equal to 18, and then for that specific ID transfer the first name, last name and email to this blank cells. So let's jump into VS Code and see how we can do that using Python. So here I have created one Python file called vlookup.py. You will need to create Python file on your side. It doesn't need to be named Vlookup. You can name it anything. So very first thing we need to do is import Openpyxl module. Now before we start doing an actual Vlookup operation, we need to import Openpyxl module, create a workbook and a worksheet object. And I'm not gonna explain what those are. If you have any question or if you are struggling how to import module or what are worksheet and workbook objects are, then go back to my previous videos in this same playlist and you will find explanation about those concepts in detail. So let's first import Openpyxl and that create a workbook object. So to create a workbook object, you first need to call load workbook method, and in here pass your Excel sheet name. So we need, since we are doing a Vlookup between two Excel sheet, we need to create a two workbook object that belongs to each of this Excel sheet. So first let's create a workbook object for daily sheet. So I'll call it daily data.xlsx and let's assign a variable as well. Daily data equal to Openpyxl load workbook and here your actual Excel file name. Similarly, we need to create another workbook object for master data. So I'll name it master data Openpyxl.load workbook, and here instead of daily data we need to pass master data.xlsx. Now on top of this workbook object we need to get the worksheet. So first let's get the worksheet for daily data. So in daily data we have only worksheet called sheet 1. So I will call that sheet 1 in here. Can say let's name it master sheet equal to master actually let's first start with the daily sheet. So daily sheet equal to daily data and square bracket, and here you have to pass a sheet name. So for daily data we need to grab sheet 1. If you have multiple sheet in this Excel sheet, then pass the sheet name that you wanted to use, sheet 1. And similarly we have to grab a sheet from master data as well. So for master data we have a sheet name called data. So we have to do a similar operation here, but I'll call it master sheet equal to and in here we have to call master data workbook object, and our sheet name was data. So far we have imported Openpyxl, created a workbook object and also created a worksheet object. So now let's start doing an actual operation. just to explain you logic little bit, what I will do is I'll first iterate through this daily sheet and grab all of this ID, and then I'll iterate through this master data and match the ID that I grabbed from this Excel sheet with this column. Once I find a match in master data Excel sheet, I'll grab the first name, last name, email, and append it to this Excel sheet. So this is a bit complicated, and I will show you how you can do that in a Python with step-by-step method. But remember, this is a one way to do it. There could be several other ways. On top of my head, I can think at least 2 other ways you can achieve the same operation. So please let me know in the comment if you wanted to see how you can do the same VLOOKUP operation using different method. To start with, first I will create some kind of a loop and iterate through this daily data. To do that, I will use a for loop here. I can say for, let's use I variable in here, or we can use a row variable. Actually, let's use I variable, because I'm gonna use, there is another method, another property of shell called .row, and we will use that to grab a row number in a bit. So I'll use I variable in here. I'll say I in daily sheet, and we can use the iter row method, and let's first print I and make sure this is working. So I have added the print statement. Now let's run the code. You can say Python, and file name is vlookup.py, and let's run it. Right, I get the error. It says does not have this attribute iter row. I get it. It should be iter rows. So let's call it iter rows, save it again, go back to our terminal, clear the console, and rerun our Python command. And this time we are getting the output. So what it's basically doing is it's giving us each row as a tuple. So if I go back to my Excel sheet, and this is our daily data Excel sheet, and you can see here we have 11 rows in here, and we are getting the 11 rows in our output. So it's working. Now we don't want this row locations. What we need is to grab the ID column from this Excel sheet, because that's what we are going to use for lookup in this master data. So let's do that. So ID column is the first element in each tuple. So we can use the indexing on this I variable and print the values just to see if it is working, and I'll call it .value method here and assign it to variable called ID. Now let's print ID in here, and I'm expecting if I run this program, it should print all of this value in a column. So go back to our terminal, clear the console, and rerun our Python command. And perfect, it's giving from row 1 till row 11 all of the values for this A column. So we are getting our output correct. Now we need to grab another thing from this daily sheet, and it's a row number. Basically we will use that row number later, and you will see here in a little bit how we will use that row number. But before I show you that, let's first grab that value. And to grab a row number, all you have to do is call the cell and add here and call method.row, and let's save this in a variable called row number. And also let's make sure it's working. So I'll add another print statement here and print the row numbers. So now go back to our terminal, rerun our Python file, and perfect, it's giving us row number that start from 1 to 11. And if I go back to my Excel file, you can see here this is the row number 1, and it goes all the way till row 11, and that's what we are getting in here. So it's all good. Now Since we have the IDs here, what I wanted to do is iterate over this master data in here and look for the row where the ID, so this ID matches, and then grab the data. To do that, we need to create another for loop inside this daily sheet for loop. So we can do that simply using for this time. Let's use a different variable since we already use I. So I'll use j. For j in master sheet, and we use the similar function iter rows. Perfect. Now it will basically iterate over all of the rows in a master sheet, and in here I will add a conditional statement. Says if j, each j is a tuple, and tuple basically have a one element per column. So first tuple will be this one, and it will have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 element in it. Okay, and we only need to grab this first element for now, just for a comparison sake. So this is the element for first element, and since Python indexing start at 0, we need to call it as j0, and j0 will be the location of that column. So we need to call dot value method in here, and once we get the value, we want to compare that value with this ID. So really what it's doing is taking this number 18, and then in this column it will iterate over all of these values, right? And wherever it will find 18 is the same number as this one, then it will, this condition will satisfy. Okay, so now we have add our conditional statement, and just to sake of verification, let's add one print statement and add here j, and instead of printing 0, we will print value from the second column, which is a first name. So to get a second column, we need to use a j1 and dot value. All right, so now let's go back to our terminal, clear it, and rerun our Python file. Alrighty, so it's returning, right? Now to compare it, I'll go back to our Excel sheet, and very first column, the value is ID, right? So that's first row, and in here what we are getting is a first name. So in here we need to find a cell where it says ID and jump to the B column and make sure that value is returned. So in first column it's ID, and for B column it's first name, so it should return a first name, and that's what we are seeing. Now let's compare another one. So in this Excel sheet, number 4 is 22 in here, and in here now we have to go to the row where ID is equal to 22, which is this one. Let me highlight that, and it should return job now as an output. So fourth value in our terminal should be job now. So this is first, second, third, and fourth is a job now. So it's returning correct value. So now we know it's working. So let's get other columns as well. So this J1 is a B column in this Excel sheet. We also want to get a C column, so it will be J2, and also wanted to get this D column, so it will be J3. So let's add those as well. And now since we know it's working, we don't want to print this again. So now we have the values for each IDs, and let me clear this print statement real quick in here. All right, and remove that braces as well. So now we have a value, so we need to assign this value and add back to this daily data Excel sheet. So now this master data Excel sheet is no longer needed because we are getting whatever value we are expecting. So let me just minimize it, and in here come back to here, and what we will do is add 3 new columns for first name, last name, and email based on this ID value that we found in a master data Excel sheet. So let's do that here. What we will do here is first call a daily data sheet here, and in here we will use a cell method. Now in a cell method we need to pass a two argument, row and column. So here we will use the row that is the same as this row number, so that way we can add a value for that specific row. So I'll assign row equal to row number and a column equal to which column you want to add a data. So in here we wanted to add a first name in this D column. So D column is this 1, 2, 3 and 4. So D column is a fourth column number, right? So I'll add a fourth, and here we have to add a dot value command and simply assign it to this J1, and J1 is basically the first name from the master data list. Similarly, we want to get a last name, and we will get that from this J2 dot value, and the email, which is this J3. So to add that, we just have to replicate the same operation a couple more times. So in here we will keep the row number same, because ultimately we wanted to have first name, last name, everything for all the IDs in a same row, but the column number will change. So we already used D column, which is on a fourth location for first name. We will use this E column, which is on a fifth location for a last name, and we will use this F column for an email, which is a sixth column. So we just have to replace a column number in here. This is a last name, so I'll add a column number 5, and this is an email, so I'll add a column number 6. Once you add that, you should be all set. Now let me run the operation in here and make sure it doesn't throw any error. It will not yet save the values because we need to pass a save command whenever we make change in Excel sheet using a Python. So we haven't passed that yet. So this code will run, but actual change will not be made. So I'm just running this code to make sure there isn't any error in my code. So it perfectly ran, so no issues. So I'm gonna clear my console here, come back in here and just add one last command for saving the Excel sheet. You can save this in a same Excel sheet, or you can create a new one. Just for sake of clarity, I'm gonna create a brand new daily data Excel sheet. So what we need to do here is call daily data in here, and make sure this is a daily data, not daily sheet. In all of this operation we did that in a daily sheet, but to make a final save we need to use this workbook object. So I'll call it this as a daily data dot save, and in here you have to pass the location of your Excel sheet. So let's save this Excel sheet on a desktop. So I'll just since I wanted to save this in a same location where my other files are, I'll just pass the name, and I'll name it updated daily sheet dot xlsx, and let's make sure I don't have any other file name with this name. So I'll open the terminal, and in here we only have daily data, master data, and vlookup.py file. So it looks like everything is added. So let's go back to our terminal and rerun this command, python vlookup.py, and it ran successfully. So I'm expecting it should create a update underscore daily underscore sheet.xlsx, and yes, perfectly it created it. So I'll open this in here, and let me close this daily data now because it's no longer relevant. And you can see here we have added a 3 new column, first name, and it's just adding a first name. So there is some issue in our code. Let's go back and check it out. Okay, so I found the issue. The reason it's added only first name for all 3 columns, because even though we have added the different column number here, we have kept this value j1 dot value as same. So we need to update those as well. This number j1 j1 j1, this coming from our master data sheet. So let's go to our master data real quick. Let me open that in here, close this one, open master data, And in master data, we want to get first name B column. It's J1. This is a C column. Is this supposed to be a J2, and this is a J3. So let's change that in here. Call it J2 and J3, and everything looks okay now. We'll go back, close my Excel sheet, and go back to my Python file and rerun our Python command again. And no error. So now let's go to our update daily sheet, and this time we are getting correct output. So we are getting 3 new columns in our update sheet called first name, last name, and email. For quality assurance, let's go back to master data and compare it with the IDs. So I'll first check what is the first name, last name, and email for person who is assigned to ID 18. So in this Excel sheet, this is the column number. We need to check the ID 18, and this is the ID 18, right? So ID 18 name is Del Redhold D Rehold at hp.com, and yep, we are getting correct output. Let's verify for other one. Let's verify for this row 7, which is ID 101. In here we can quickly jump to ID 101. And in here, this is the values. Let's compare that with our updated file. So in here for ID 101, the name is Lynette Erin Graham, and ID is also correct. And let's compare it for the last one, which is 807. So let's quickly jump to row 808. And in here for ID 808, we have this values, and let's compare that. Actually it's 807, so it's supposed to be not this one, should be this one. So let's highlight that one. And 807 is Magda Liver, and email is also correct. So ultimately this is working. We have done some quality rates. So this is how you can do VLOOKUP for multiple columns using Python. Thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, please hit the like button and also subscribe my channel. That means a lot to me. Thank you so much.